That leads perfectly to our session number 2. And as we're going to our next session, it is titled Embrace Discomfort, right? Embrace Discomfort. So now we're going in deeper with this topic. And we've learned how to make those initial connections and ask questions. We will now discover practical strategies to foster strong, healthy relationships and effective techniques for setting and maintaining boundaries. We will learn how to cultivate fulfilling and sustainable connections in every area of your life where you live, work, and play. To help us facilitate this discussion, we have Dr. Corey Allan in the house. Dr. Corey Allan is a husband, father, and author and speaker, as well as a marriage and family therapist with a PhD in family therapy. He and his wife, Pam, host a weekly podcast, Sexy Marriage Radio. Who does not want to listen to that, right? Right away, right? Listen to that. Where they help from conversations and actions that help couples create a marriage fully alive. Corey has been in private practice for over 22 years. And he's the founder of SMR, an online resource aimed at helping marriages not just survive, but to thrive. Guys, please join me in welcoming Dr. Corey Allan.
So I got a chance to have lunch with a friend yesterday, actually, Greg, that I've known for 28 years. And we got a chance to catch up. And as we were talking, I was having a real hard time listening. And so the Ruddys did a fantastic job of giving some techniques of how to listen well. But where we're going to go with this session is we're going to move into what's going on with us in the midst of this concept of trying to listen. Because as I'm listening to Greg and having trouble listening to Greg, I've got all these things I wanted to share. I wanted to catch up too. I didn't want it to make it just the Greg show. I wanted to be part of it too. And so I've got all of these concepts and thoughts and aspects of what's going on in life going on as I'm trying to listen to him. And so tell me if I'm off base on this at all. Sometimes these kinds of conversations with somebody we really know well even, they really become parallel monologues. Follow what I'm saying? Nobody's listening to anybody. And some of it is because I'm not really aware of what's going on inside me. Because when I have things that are going on, either I'm distracted, or I'm uncomfortable, or I'm uncertain, or I'm insecure, what I find is I don't function well because I'm in a state of discomfort. And we all experience this. Everybody familiar with the whole phrase of comfort zone? We all like our comfort zone. How many of you have the same route you drive to work every single day? Same route you drive to church every day. If I was to say, hey, tomorrow, when you come to services, go a different way, what do you feel? Like when you come out of your neighborhood, don't turn right or left, turn right. What do you feel? Because if you're like me, like, no, that takes all the time out of the whole thing. Why would I do that? Okay, let's go a little bit deeper. So how many of you have your chair in the living room? Come on. Come on, we're all friends here, okay? How many of you have your assigned seat at the dinner table? We're all friends here, no judgment, well, a little, but okay. And then those of you that are married, how many of you have your side of the bed? I know I'm meddling now. Okay, so what if I was to say to you tonight at dinner, sit in a different seat? Yes, thank you. Thank you. Okay, what if I was to say to you that are married tonight, get on, get on the other side of the bed. Right, so what happens with this? What's going on? It's because we're uncomfortable. The thought of it is like, I know, that just makes me uncomfortable. I was teaching this one time years ago, and a friend actually did it. On his way home from church, they went a different way. And I got a text from him. and said, we got every single red light, there was a wreck, and we were late to dinner. I hate you. I'm like, I love you too, dude. It's so good to see you. Okay, so everybody a little uncomfortable thinking through these things? Okay, now we're going to practice it even more. I want everybody to switch seats in here. You cannot sit in the same seat. Go. Some of you are just going to do the whole flop. I get it. If you want to go expert level and you're in the back, come all the way to the front. Or if you're in the front, go all the way to the back. But everybody switch seats. Okay. I also realize that some of what the idea of talking about the discomfort we feel could be because you don't have a break and you're itching to get a move around. So that's part of what this is. But when you think about what goes on in us, how are you feeling about having to sit in a different seat? Is anybody not really happy with me? Honestly, a couple people, you're not happy with me, okay? Anybody love this? Like, I love discomfort. Bring it. Okay? You guys are crazy. Okay. That's so great. Because what's happening with us in this process? Because actually, when we face discomfort, there's an instinctual process that goes on in us. God created us in unique and wonderful ways. And our brains function. We have the 3 different levels of the brain. I'm going to make it really simplistic on the biology of it. We have the back, the middle, and the front. Okay, so you got the reptilian, the mammalian, mammals, and the human. Okay, that's kind of the easy way to think about this. That's very, very simplistic. If you say it to your neurologist, they're going to laugh at you because it's a lot more complex than that. But for the sake of our conversation, this is what goes on. And when we get uncomfortable with situations, what does it trigger? The reptilian, right? Maybe everybody's familiar with this. The fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. Maybe anybody not ever heard of the fawn? This is a new one within the last several years. They've recognized this is an aspect of what goes on. So the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, that plays an instinctual role in our life. It's designed for a reason. Back when we were among the not as comfortable creatures as we are now, this mechanism kept us alive. Make sense? I mean, if we're out on the prairie or we're out in wild, we want this. This is keeping me alive. But now, even today, when we live in a much more comfortable world, there's an aspect of these things get triggered. And we predominantly will default to one. We are capable of all. It's pretty obvious, right? The fight is you attack it. The flight is you run from it. The freeze is exactly that, you freeze. And then the fawn is you just kind of give in and acquiesce. That's the bigger one. These are the way over the top pleasers that they just go along all the time. That's a mechanism in our brain. Another way to think about this is you're a bulldog, you're a rabbit, you're a turtle, or you're a deer. By default, we are one of them. Sometimes multiple. So okay, we're all friends here. Who all are my bulldogs? Okay, yeah, all right. These are the people, you see the problem, let's go. We'll solve it, right? Who's our rabbits? That's me. I am a rabbit. Come on, I don't just lead the meetings, I'm a part of them. If we can get you to show up to them, because we all run from these kinds of conflicts, okay? Who's our turtles? These are the ones that just shell up till the storm passes. Okay, and then who's our deers? I just kind of give in. It's okay, all kumbaya. Okay, perfect. Okay, so as you're looking at this concept of how things are triggered in our brains, the way this plays out and where it's important is understanding that we are always in relationship. And these things are always running in our bodies under the surface. and they get in the way of our relationships. The conversation I started with, talking about with my friend Greg, one of the things that made it such a problem for me to connect with him is I've got these monsters that are going in my head because of what's happening around me and within us and then within me. And we're going to unpack these monsters here in just a minute, even more thoroughly. But when we look at the concepts of relationship, we are always in them. You guys agree with that? You are always in a relationship. And I believe relationship is where God shows up the deepest. What are we called to have with him? A relationship with him. But I think on a human level, when we have relationships with one another, God shows up. And so what I want to try to get across this morning is the importance of us getting out of our own way to actually be in a relationship better with those that we live, work, and play. Because what is that going to lead to? Come on, they set it up earlier with the idea of the meaningful, I'm just giving it away right there. It's going to lead to meaningful See, my instinctual brain was going, I was in the flight mode on that. But this is what's happening. And so if you look at relationships, there's a hierarchy of them. Okay, this is just a simplistic, this is actually a diagram that was created from a center that works with kids with autism and on the spectrum to help them understand the components of relationships. I think we all can benefit from this because we got strangers, the casual acquaintances, the friends, the deep friendship, and this is one that a lot of people don't think about actually. The relationship I have with myself, that's a component of every single relationship. You guys see that? And the closer in on this hierarchy, if you think about it, or the circles, the closer in it gets, the harder it is to connect deeper. Because there's more tension, there's more pressure, there's more history, there's more poker face known. Those of you that are married, how many of you have a good poker face with your spouse? Usually they know, right? They know because we have a pretty accurate map of each other. If you have good friends in relationship, they know. They can read it. If you have children, they come home from the end of the day. How was the day? And they say, good. And you're like reading their face going, I don't think so. Because it's a harder, see what I'm talking about? If I have a bad moment with a barista when I pick up my coffee, does it impact me as much or am I aware as much? No. But if I'm having a trouble with somebody I live with or I work with or my neighbor, I can pick up on it faster because there's an importance of this relationship. And so our thoughts and our feelings and our opinions always get in the way. And so the whole goal that I'm trying to get across this morning is that self-awareness is the key. And so if you ever have wondered, why is connecting so deeply so hard? Has anybody ever wondered that? Like, I really want to connect with people, particularly like my family. Why is it so hard? The Ruddys did a great job of setting up some of that framework of it's incredibly difficult because we get caught in these situations where what they're talking about, I don't understand, I don't care about, but I do care about them. Make sense? And so then I get caught in this situation of how do I show that I care about this without, so there's a whole complicated process going on in our brains. And so what we need to do is learn how do we get out of our own way so that the Spirit can guide. And the way I think we need to do that is learn to settle ourselves down. Rein in our rabbit, bulldog, turtle, or deer. And just connect and be present and engage with where they are. Because every single one of us, when you're talking about relationships, every single one of us has to realize none of us want to see how we are our own worst enemies. And we will continue to be so until we see it that we are. Because I can ask myself questions. I've got a 19-year-old and a 17-year-old, and I hear them talk about their dialogues and their conversations and the complications of relationships and the complications of college life and all those different things. And as I'm hearing these conversations, there's an element in me going, do you realize the common denominator in the thread of the whole story you're sharing is you? I had a client one time I loved. She was on her 5th relationship. She was an older woman. And she was like, I'm coming to see you, Dr. Allan, because I keep picking bad men. Right? So I got to find a good man. And as she's talking, I'm kind of blunt. As she's talking through things, I'm like, how about let's talk about the common denominator in the story? That'd be you. And she's like, I don't like you. I'm like, okay. So we talk a little bit more, and then she's finally like, okay, I see what you're saying. Because we don't want to recognize that we keep getting in our own way. Because when we realize what is going on in a relationship dynamic, and we realize these monsters that are at play in us, we have to come to grips with the fact I have to examine what is really going on with me in the context of this relationship. Because I can placate things pretty easily. I mean, everybody's familiar with this. You walk in on a Sunday morning, how you doing? Fine, you, great. And you keep right on passing each other. My favorites are, and I have done this and still probably will at times when I'm in my reptilian brain, someone comes in and says, good morning, Corey. And I say, fine, you? That's what we're talking about, is it all of a sudden I start being exposed of who I am. Because I believe relationships expose me to me. And if you want more on this, shameless plug, there's a marriage class going on Sunday nights that we're talking about this for the next 13 weeks. Okay, back to our show today. But there's an element of what goes on that these monsters in us get triggered when we're uncomfortable. And there's 3 big ones, and we're going to spend a little bit of time on them. So if you want to write these down, they're going to be pretty simple, and they've already been hinted at. We're just going to name them and claim them a little differently the way the Ruddies set this up, because it's going to blend perfectly. There's one. The first monster is the me monster. Everybody should be familiar with this guy. The second is the fix-it monster. And then the last one is the yes but monster. Okay, so let's talk about this. The me monster. Everybody familiar with the me monster? You hear the conversation of, oh man, I am so incredibly busy. And you're like, oh yeah, I feel you. And then you start listing your life. You start sharing everything. And this was what was talked about earlier. You know what, my kids are so disrespectful. They're so frustrating. And we basically can respond with, you think you've got it bad. Let me tell you my journey. That's the me monster. It becomes all about me. And here's the characteristics of the me monster. They are, and I'm going to be blunt, when our me monsters show up, I am self-absorbed. I care more about myself than others, and I have no self-awareness. Sorry for the gut punch. Actually, I'm not sorry for the gut punch. This is good. Because it's recognizing we have this capability in us that's instinctual. Because again, if I get uncomfortable, I do things that try to make it comfortable for me. Follow what I'm saying? Because if I'm comfortable with me, that typically means I'm talking about me. Is it just me that does this? I feel really exposed right now. Okay. No, so it's the idea of the me monster really is all about me, and I get in the way of the dynamic of what could be between us. The fix-it monster. Everybody's familiar with the fix-it monster. I am horrible at this when it comes to my family, particularly, I'm calling her out, my wife and technology. Right? My kids, they teach us, they're 19 and 17, so it's like, hey, what do I do? Here, Dad, and they take it and fix it for me. But my wife gets frustrated about something, and she's like, I can't get this to work. And so Mr. Fix-It here steps in, grabs the computer from her, and just takes care of it. Well, at least my wife is blunt enough with me like I try to be with her. This like, no, I don't want that. I'm just telling you I'm frustrated. Right? Because how oftentimes do you share something with a friend and they immediately jump in with the, oh, here's what you should do. Oh, I've got the solution because, man, my advice is fantastic. Right? I mean, all of us that like me, my advice is always spot on for other people. So, yeah, good. You guys caught the joke. I can always fix your problem. But let's not talk about mine. Right? But the fix-it monster, the concept, the problem with the fix-it monster is you solve problems that aren't yours. There's poor boundary awareness, and that's the concept of somebody's just venting something to you and you take over and you make it your own, or you try to fix it for them, and then you like to control things. We get a lot of identity to know that I can help people, and I think that's a good part of us, but it can go beyond what's helpful, right? Fix-it monsters. Do we have some of you guys in here with me? I am this. Yeah. A kid comes home and they say, I'm having trouble understanding this. Oh, well, you should probably do this, and then you should probably do this, and you should probably do this. And then report back to me on how it went. Right? We'll solve it all, because I really want the accolades for look at how I solved your problem and I made your life better. That's what we do with family members. That's what we do with friends. And we can even do this with people we just are meeting. Like you meet somebody on a Sunday morning, you meet somebody at a coffee shop, you meet a new coworker. We encourage our kids when it comes to the first days of schools, you need to tell us at the end of the day, meet a name of somebody you've just met. Right? Just kind of we did this with our college sophomore. It was fun. We were like, I remember this from elementary. Sydney, tell me some names of people you just met today. But as we're hearing these things, we can often, like all of a sudden now, I want to be important to them. And so what can I do? I'll solve your problem. When I think a lot of times relationships, I will for sure say this about marriage, but relationships, I think a lot of times there are problems that aren't meant to be solved. They're meant to be lived through. I think God gives us problems in our world because, one, we have free will, but also we learn through struggle. If you don't believe me, anybody in here remember vividly growing pains when you were little? Little self-discovery or exposure here of my history, some of the things I've struggled with in my life. When I got my driver's license, I was 5'5", 115. So I was 5'5" and 115 pounds. I hated how small I was. My freshman year of college is when I grew 6 inches. And I did not like that experience, but I loved what it was producing because I knew I'm going to get taller finally. And I have a son that's probably 6'1" or 6'2", and you better believe he loves lording over his now puny father. What's the weather like down there, Dad? But it's that element of the struggle produces something. And so when we're talking about relationships and walking closely alongside people or meeting people, the struggle of wrestling with myself is what gets the chance to produce curiousness, which then gets the chance to connect on a deeper level. Okay, so we got one more monster to cover, and this is the yes but monster. This is where you have been told, I actually had this happen this week. My sister called, and her 2-year-old puppy passed away right in front of her that morning. Yeah, devastating. They're members of our family. Devastating. And the thing that's so interesting is when we get really uncomfortable with things, we say some things that are horrifically unhelpful. It's an attempt to try to soothe a pain, maybe, but whose pain am I really soothing? My own. That's where you hear the phrase of, oh, well, you can get another puppy. It'll be okay. She had a brother that's right there at the house already still. It'll be fine. Rather than, no, that hurts. That's a struggle. That's a pain. That's the yes, but monster. And then I'm going to meddle a little bit. I realize us Christians often use a lot of platitudes that are good, but they're not enough. And I'm not shortchanging God here, because I believe when we get in along people on a deeper level, he uses us as his hands and feet, and as his shoulder, and as his ears to listen to another human being in their struggle. Because I really believe in the power of human to human connection. I believe it's so vital. So the yes, but person is the one that gives the yes, but, and they give an answer. Or the, well, you should pray about that. Yes, you should, but the middle of the struggle I've got right now is still important. And so here's some characteristics of the yes, but. Defensiveness. This often happens in relationships where something's coming at me and I'm like, but yes, in my defense, rather than, wait, they're bringing to me something that's important and it matters, so I don't need to dismiss it. I avoid hard truths. This is a difficult one because our life has difficult truths. You've heard the phrase that, this was years ago when I was growing up, I heard the phrase, somebody made a comment about every single time somebody has a birth of somebody, this preacher would say, oh, another death has entered the world. I realize it's a deep one and it's sorry and it hurts, but we all are fleeting here. We have eternity because of Christ. But the struggles we have while here are real. And they hurt. And this is the third one, is unable to tolerate discomfort. Because what I want to try to get across with these monsters is the idea, maybe, okay, we'll get there in a minute. What happens a lot of times when there's an interaction with us and my monster starts showing up is I'm not really connecting with the person. I'm not connecting in the moment. I'm not alongside them with their struggle. I'll say this again in a minute, but we can't do a lot for a person's struggle or pain, but we can do a lot alongside them. Let me say that again. We can't do a lot for a person's struggle or pain, but we can do a lot alongside them. Because that relationship that we have helps create a better connection to where we can really be alongside as their struggles come up. Because how many of us, as Bruce and Jaime talked about at the beginning, loneliness, anxiety, and addiction. Loneliness is an epidemic. But knowing I'm not alone lightens my burden dramatically. But to know I'm not alone means I've got to get out of my own way to connect. And so how do we tame our monsters? It's pretty simple as far as the concept, pretty difficult to actually do. I'll shoot straight with you. So I have to see it in myself. What monster am I most prone to do? How do I recognize it faster? Because I also have to learn to soothe myself and realize the relationship dynamic is not all about me. We have a joke sometimes that as Pam and I are conversing, it'll shift subjects and I thought we were talking about me. No, hold on, I want to keep talking about me because it's a human thing. But to truly connect on a deeper level means I have to realize it's not all about me. And when I can get better at that, I learn what I've already said, that we can't do much for the struggle of our friends' lives, but we can do a lot alongside them. And how do we do this? We got to be willing to do life with them. And that means I don't always have an answer. I don't always have comfort. I don't always have the ability other than just be. And so we're going to switch. I'm going to bring up Lisa and Mike. We're going to walk through a little bit of the dynamic of what is it like when you embrace a struggle and other people are alongside you, or you find yourself in the midst of uncomfortable situations and you get a chance to connect with other people. And so welcome to the stage, guys. Welcome, Mike and Lisa. Lisa Scheffler, Mike Swim. So, Lisa, you've had, if members of Christ Fellowship would know your story pretty well, because it was quite a story of what all went down several years ago. But what I would love to have you speak to is, how did people walk alongside you well, where their monsters weren't as evident or prominent, but how did people care for you deeply?
Yeah, for those of you who don't know, in 2022, I had an epidural abscess, which is an infection in your spinal column, and I almost died. I was on a ventilator for a couple of weeks. My kidneys shut down, and it was a really long recovery. I was in the hospital for 3 months, and then really it was another probably almost a year after that before I was kind of back to myself. And so you guys were amazing. Sorry. Lots of people were so great to step up and care for me. But I will say the people who probably were the most meaningful were the ones who really took their cues from me.
Yeah.
And who sort of let me kind of lead. Because, when you're in a situation like this, and whether it's an illness or a death in the family or a job loss or whatever you're struggling with, you're not at your best. And you don't always feel like you're in your right mind in some ways. And you just need someone to come and go, what do you need today? Because I felt like some days I was kind of upbeat, wanted to talk. It's very let's just talk about you. And other days I really just needed someone to sit with me. And then other days I really just wanted them to listen to me, talk about what was going on in me. So yeah, I think, like you said, putting aside yourself and just responding to what that person needs in the moment.
And I also love the fact that a willingness for somebody to recognize, I can take my cue from you, to let you teach me how to care for you best.
Yes.
By listening well, by engaging, by connecting.
And I'll just say one other thing. I think saying something is better than saying nothing. I think a lot of times we feel like, I don't know, I'll just make things worse. It's going to be awkward. I don't know what to say. But honestly, every text, every email, every card someone sent was really, really meaningful, even if I wasn't able to respond. My husband would read all the messages I got, and that meant a lot. So even if you're like, I don't really know what to say, but you're just like, send a quick text, hey, I'm praying for you. Hey, I'm thinking about you. And then, like I said, take your cues from them.
That's so good. Thank you, Lisa. So Mike, you have an experience where a lot of times you've seen to find yourself in discomforting situations or seek them out. I mean, we'll let you decide on that one. but how have you what have you seen that works, that you've learned about you in those moments as you've found yourself in all the different situations you are?
Sure, that's a great question. I think a lot of the situations that I found myself in were largely unintentional, right? And I didn't wake up one day and say, hey, I'm going to struggle with alcohol, or I'm going to end up volunteering and working at a pregnancy resource center, but there I was. So some of the things that I found initially is what helped me was to start out by being vulnerable myself with the people that I spoke to. And so when I did that, then that led to more of a willingness to engage. And then once I engaged, some of the discomfort would begin to go away. I think another thing, though, and I think this is so important, and it's been talked about a lot, but we have to let the Holy Spirit really lead these conversations, because I don't have the power to save or fix or forgive. And so often when we're in these conversations, we have a desire for the outcome that we want from the other, right? And what I've learned over time is to be able to step back from that and go, hey, you know what? God's got this. And whether the outcome is favorable to my desire or not, that's okay.
Right.
And that's where I think we get in trouble so many times, because we just desire so much for a particular outcome.
Absolutely. And you have an experience with a
I do.
family that had a loss. And
Yeah, okay.
Briefly share that.
Yeah, there was a man that I had mentored, a young man. I had mentored him for several years. He and his wife had 3 children, and they were pregnant again with their 4th, and they came initially, and they were thinking about abortion, but they ended up having the child. But literally 3 months later, it was on Mother's Day of 2022, this child died of SUDS, sudden unexplained death syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
And I was right out there in the lobby when I got the call from them. And right away, like the Holy Spirit's like, hey, you got to go, right? You got to go be with them. But I'm driving over to where they were, and I'm like, whoa, what do I do? What do I say, right? This is like a situation I'd never dealt with.
Right.
And so I used my lifeline, my dial-a-pastor. I called Pastor Bruce. And,
Nice.
And I said, what do you do? And he's dealt with this stuff a lot. And he said, more than anything, just be there for them.
Yeah.
Right? Let them know that you're there for them. And like you said, Lisa, it wasn't that I didn't say anything and just sat, but like we had pizza, we talked, we went out on the porch. The memorial was a few days later, and so Lori and I went to the memorial, and we were there for them. We were a shoulder to cry on. We were just a presence, right? And so it was really, really powerful, I think.
That's so good. And Lisa, you have, I guess you can kind of confirm that of just like the people that would just show and be spoke well to you because of the time and experience to put themselves alongside you.
Yeah, I just was grateful for anyone who took the time to come and spend time with me. And be yourself. I think learning a training like this, you makes all of a sudden feel very awkward. Like, I don't want to talk too much. I don't want to talk too little. And, how do I act? But, be yourself, and God's going to use you in the way he's designed you. And I loved all the doers who were like, I'll go and run errands for you, or I can do these and this and this. And then I had some, my friends who were just more calm presence, and they would just sit with me and read to me or play music, and I think, so be yourself, how God has created you, because he'll use you.
That's so good. Well, thank you guys. Give them applause, please. Thank you, guys. When it comes to relationships, I think we get challenged in a lot of different ways. You guys agree? We come upon situations that are like, whoa, I don't know what to do with that. But I think a willingness to embrace some discomfort, to put myself in a situation and stay uncomfortable a little bit, is where I grow, they grow, and we grow. I think God shows up. If you look at scriptures, worry and fear are mentioned over 200 times throughout scriptures. So what's that presuppose? We're going to worry, and we're going to have fear. And we will also have struggle in our life. And when I read the scriptures, a lot of what I see is God, in some instances, takes away the struggle. But in others, what I see, and this just really started to jump out at me, was he's there with me in those struggles. And a lot of times, I believe personally, how God is with me in those struggles is through one of you. Your presence in the midst of that struggle is God showing up. Because it plants the seed, it shows you're not alone, it gives me the ability to connect and have somebody present. Lisa alluded to the just showing up and be. I read an article years ago of a guy that was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. He was a writer. And at that time, it was a death sentence even faster than it is now, but it was still one that you don't want. And he gave up on the treatment and just thought, I'm going to just ride this out. And everybody that cared about him lost their minds because they didn't want to see him go, which is totally human, totally understand. But for him, he wanted to make that call. And so he talked about with the time he had left, the one person that really spoke the most to him was a friend of his that showed up every afternoon at 4 p.m. and gave him a foot rub. Sometimes they spoke at this guy's behest. He would start the conversation. Other times there was not a word spoken, but the guy was there regularly. And I think we get a chance to do this. When we pay attention and we get out of our own way and we have the good questions that are curious, I get a chance to connect deeper, which I then believe God takes and massages and uses, that Rafe's going to build on in the third session, to pivot the conversation, to go deeper with my conversation about Christ, because I've created and done the legwork of I've gotten out of my own way and I can make it about somebody else other than me. Okay, so as we wind this down, you got your notebooks. I see several of you already writing away. Maybe you've already done this, but your takeaway, I want you to write down real briefly a takeaway, a phrase, but the bigger thing is, what monster do you need to be watching for the most? Because we all know which one it is for ourselves. Like, I've got the fix-it monster. He is raring to go because I really like my advice for other people. But which monster is yours? Just write that down, and then the hope becomes, how do you watch for that sooner and see it sooner? And then you can just be honest, right? You're having a conversation at lunch or at the break here in a minute, and somebody's sharing something, and then you make it about you, and you can easily go, oh, wait, that was my me monster. I'm sorry, we're talking about you. And now all of a sudden you're back right engaged with them. That is easy to do sometimes. But it's real simple, because now all of a sudden, what did I just show? I showed I cared about you. And I think that's what we all ultimately want. So tame the monsters, and we all become better.